Okay. Let's see what happens today. All right. This is session number 81. Session number 81, chapter 11, God or the Ego. Section 4, IV. The inheritance of God's Son. All righty then. Let's jump right in. The inheritance of God's Son. Never forget that the sonship is your salvation, for the sonship is yourself, your higher self, with a big S. As God's creation, it is yours. Belonging to you, it is His. Yourself does not need salvation, but your mind needs to learn what salvation is. You're not saved from anything, but you are saved for glory. Glory is your inheritance, given you by your Creator, that you might extend it. Yet, if you hate part of yourself, all your understanding is lost, because you are looking on what God created as yourself without love. And since what He created is part of Him, you're denying Him His place in His own altar. Okay. What? Never forget that the sonship is your salvation. Okay? Salvation, it's like you're released from this thought system. You're released from this thought system of sin, guilt, and fear. Oh man, I did something wrong. Right? Now I'm going to get punished. That's the pervasive thought that comes with us into this world, into this experience. Right? There's something wrong with me. There's something lacking. There's some void that I have to fill, or that I have to cover up. There's something missing in me. Okay? And I'm going to pay for that. Right? It's going to be pointed out. Look what's wrong with him. And ultimately, what's in the back of my mind, deep in the deep recesses, is that I did something wrong by denying God. I ruined the kingdom, okay? And now God's pissed. He's going to come, pardon my French. Now God's coming for me, all right? God is very angry, let me put it that way. That's why my wonderful wife Jean says I should be the patron saint of truck drivers. But what can I tell you? I'm from Queens. I was born in Brooklyn, though. Okay, so never forget that the sonship is your salvation. For the sonship is yourself. It's who you really are. You're the creation of God. All right? You are that. You're it. All right? As God's creation, the sonship is yours. It's all yours. And because it's yours, it's His. It's God's. All right? There's no separation. There's no differentiation. All right? Yourself, your true self, does not need salvation. All right? It just doesn't need it. But your mind needs to learn what salvation is. There's a part of the mind that has dissociated. So it has to learn what salvation is, what the release from this nonsense ego is all about. So he says, you're not saved from anything, because there's nothing that can actually hurt you in reality. Right? So you're not saved from anything. You're saved for the glory. All right? So your glory is restored to your mind, to your memory. All right? And glory is your inheritance, he says. It's really what was given you. All right? God extended himself, and there you were, happy and glorious. Right? And he says, glory is your inheritance, given by your Creator, that you might extend it as your Creator does. Right? That you might extend the happiness, the glory. All right? And if you hate any part of yourself, your true self, all right, all your understanding is lost. Right? Because you're looking on what God created as yourself without love. So that part of the mind that thought the tiny mad idea of separation could be true, could be accomplished, right? And believed it could be done, all of a sudden it forgot. It forgets. Right? Your understanding is lost. Right? It's not gone forever. All right? It's just you just don't see it. It's hiding in plain sight, as they say. All right? And it's lost because you're not looking on what God created as yourself, because you're looking on yourself without love. And since what he created is part of him, you're denying him his place in his own altar, which is the mind of the Son of God. So you're denying God. By denying yourself, you're saying that God is not in your mind. Okay? Paragraph 2. Could you try to make God homeless and know that you are at home? Can the Son of God deny the Father without believing that the Father has denied him? God's laws hold only for your protection, and they never hold in vain. What you experience when you deny your Father is still for your protection, for the power of your will cannot be lessened without the intervention of God against it, and any limitation on your power is not the will of God. Therefore, look only to the power that God gave you to save you, remembering that it is yours because it is his, and join with your brothers in peace. All right? So what you experience when you deny your Father is still for your protection. In other words, the power of your mind is still there, operating fully, and that's what protects us. Okay? The power of the mind is not diminished, even though you're denying who you are and denying who God is. All right? But the power of the mind is still there for our protection, so to speak. In reality, you don't need to be protected. Right? So the power of your mind is not diminished. All right? It cannot be lessened without the intervention of God. And any limitation on your will is not God's will. God doesn't want that. Therefore, look only to the power that God gave you to save you, right? Which is the power of your mind, the power of thought, right? The power of the mind to choose once again. Okay? The power of the mind to say, oh, I made a mistake. I want that mistake corrected, please. All right? The power of the mind to choose between the ego and the Holy Spirit, between the darkness and the light. That's the power you have. And when you choose the light, when you choose Jesus as your helper, right, or any other spiritual symbol that you feel comfortable with, right? Any true, legitimate spiritual teacher, right? You go to that, you make the choice. Help me to see that correctly. I want to be in peace. Okay? So therefore, look to the power that God gave to save you, the power of your mind. Remembering that it is yours because it's His. And join with your brothers in His peace. Okay? Choose peace. All right? Paragraph 3, your peace lies in its limitlessness. The limitlessness of your mind is where your peace is. All right? That great spaciousness that some teachers talk about. All right? Limit the peace you share, and your true self must be unknown to you. All right? If you're not willing to extend the kingdom to everyone, you're limiting it for yourself. Okay? And your true self will be unknown to you. Every altar to God is a part of you, because the light He created is one with Him. Would you cut off a brother from the light that is yours? You would not do so if you realized that you can darken only your own mind. As you bring him back, so will you return. That is the law of God for the protection of the wholeness of His Son. Right? You do not do so. Okay? Would you cut off a brother from the light that is yours? That's the question. All right? And he says you wouldn't do it if you realized that you can only darken your own mind. Okay? In other words, there's only the oneness. Okay? And as I could see the smile on Ken's face, the smirk almost, as he would say, there's nobody out there. You can only darken your own mind, even though you think it's somebody else, okay? And they're guilty. You're darkening your own mind. You're imposing guilt on your own mind, whether you know it or not. And the quicker you get to know it, the quicker you'll get to peace, okay? And it's like Joey DeCruz used to say, it doesn't make you bad. It just makes you uncomfortable, miserable. So projecting that guilt doesn't make you bad, but it makes you uncomfortable. You're not peaceful. You're not dwelling in the peace. You're not aware of who you really are. You're darkening your own mind. All right? Doesn't mean you should be condemned to hell. It just means you're probably there already. You're darkening your own mind. All right? And as you bring him back, you will return. All right? I just love the way the ideas, the themes, the thoughts repeat. All right? As you bring him back, you will return. All right? As you allow the other to be happy, to be innocent, as you become willing to see the innocence, you will become aware of your own. All right? As you allow them, bring them back to God by saying, help me to see them correctly. As you do that, you return. Okay? you return. Okay. As you bring him back, so will you return. This is the law of God. Right? This is the law of God for the protection of the wholeness of his Son. For the protection of the oneness. All right? I am you and you are me. And we are all together. Okay? Right from the psychedelic age. Okay? I am the walrus. So paragraph 4. Only you can deprive yourself of anything. It's written in italics. So that's the emphasis. Only you can deprive yourself of anything. Do not oppose this realization, for it is truly the beginning of the dawn of light. Remember also that the denial of this simple fact takes many forms. And these you must learn to recognize and to oppose steadfastly, without exception. This is a crucial step in the reawakening. The beginning phases of this reversal are often quite painful, for as blame is withdrawn from without, there is a strong tendency to harbor it within. It is difficult at first to realize that this is exactly the same thing, for there's no distinction between within and without. All right? He says there is no distinction between within and without. Well, if I withdraw the guilt from, what do you mean? They did that to me. Wait, if I withdraw that guilt, does that mean I did it to myself? That it was my fault? That I allowed this to happen to me? He says, no, don't do that to yourself. All right? He says there's a strong tendency, all right, to harbor it within. He said, don't do that. Don't let the process stop there, he will say later on. Okay? He says that's why as we're getting used to the process, he says sometimes it's very painful. He says you have to learn to recognize and to oppose, all right? That only you can deprive yourself of anything, all right? He says as you start withdrawing the projections, all right? He's the guilty one. He says there's a tendency to say, wait a second. It's me. I allowed that to happen to me. Why would I choose that? Why would I choose that? He says, don't do that to yourself. All right? Keep coming back. Keep coming back to me. All right? Ask me to help you to see it correctly. And you'll become aware. All right? So only you can deprive yourself of anything. Right? And it's your decision to believe that you're separated from God. That's how you deprive yourself. All right? And we think we're in this world of specifics, so we start getting lost in specifics. All right? You mean I was the one that chose to be this way? I was the one that chose to be abused? And this and that. Don't do that. All right? Or if you find yourself doing that, I'm going to say don't do it because it's a tendency to do that, right? But when you find yourself doing that, keep coming back to Jesus and saying, help me to see that. Help me to see myself correctly, all right? I asked for help with the perpetrator. Now can you help me? All right? Because now I think I'm guilty. And Jesus will let you know that you're not guilty. You are a child of light. All right? So he says, don't oppose the realization that I was the one that chose to believe I was separated. Okay? Okay? For it's truly the beginning of the dawn of light. All right? It's the beginning. The dawn is coming. Right? It's that crack in the ego thought system. Oh wait, I chose to believe. I'm not the innocent victim. I chose to believe that I'm separated from God. And he says this can be painful, but don't start making yourself guilty. Right? Remember also that the denial of this simple fact takes many forms. All right? That it was me who chose to believe that I could be separated from God. He says that takes many forms. Okay? And once you start looking, you see. Okay? And you must learn to recognize and all of these forms. He says you have to learn to recognize them and to oppose them steadfastly without exception. And this is a crucial step in the reawakening. And the beginning phases of this reversal are often quite painful. For as the blame is withdrawn from without, okay, there's a strong tendency to harbor it within. Well, if it's not him, it must be me. Why would I do that to myself? All right? He says it's difficult at first to realize that this is exactly the same thing. It's projection of guilt. You're just projecting it onto yourself, your smaller self. Okay? Because there's no distinction between within and without. Okay? Just keep that in mind. And also keep in mind, you're not guilty. You're not stupid. Right? Why would I do this to myself? Why would I choose that person to be my wife, my husband, my father, my mother? Why would I choose to go down that alleyway and get my butt kicked? Right? Why would I choose to go into that business and be treated that way? You know, don't do that. The reason why you would choose those things is to prove that you're separated from God. Now, we're trying to have the Holy Spirit and Jesus help us to realize we're not separated from God. Okay? Everything's okay. All right? You're not separated from God. You're going to wake up from the dream. This is the beginning of the process of reawakening. It can be difficult, and usually is. Okay? So, paragraph 5. If your brothers are a part of you, and you blame them for your deprivation, you're blaming yourself. And you cannot blame yourself without blaming them. That is why blame must be undone, not seen elsewhere. So we have to do away with blame. Don't just put it somewhere else. Lay it to yourself, and you cannot know yourself. If you blame yourself, you don't know who you are. You can't know who you are. You say, yeah, my fault. I was really stupid. I don't know why I did that. And then you insist on it, and you will try to prove it. He says, you can't know yourself that way. You can't know who you truly are. You can't know the glorious spirit that you truly are if you insist on saying, why did I do this to myself? Why would I do that? All right? Lay it to yourself, and you cannot know yourself. For only the ego blames at all. The ego is the only thing that blames anybody or anything. Self-blame is therefore ego identification, and as much an ego defense as blaming others. You cannot enter God's presence if you attack his Son. When his son lifts his voice in praise of his Creator, he will hear the voice for his Father. Yet the Creator cannot be praised without his Son, for their glory is shared and they are glorified together. Okay? So self-blame is identification with the ego. If I blame myself, I'm identifying with the fact that, well, not the fact, the idea that I separated from God. I left heaven. So self-blame is ego identification. So he says it's the same thing as blaming somebody else. All right? And I know a lot of us, a lot of people were severely perpetrated. Okay? And there's a big process with letting go of the anger, the fear, the resentment, the rage. All right? Jesus is saying, okay, look at that. And don't blame yourself. He says, I'm not telling you to blame yourself, because only the ego blames anything. All right? Just ask me for help. Ask me to guide you through it. Ask me to help you to see correctly. Ask me to bring you into the garden of peace. All right? Ask me to help you rise above the battleground and look down on it so that you can understand what has happened. All right? Do not take control. Do not blame yourself. All right? You might think it's an intellectual practice, but it's not. It's just it's the ego tricking you. All right? Why would I choose that kind of person? Don't do that. Right? You would choose that kind of person to prove to yourself you're separated from God. Now you ask Jesus, help me. Help me to see that I'm not separated from God. That's where your peace lies. Okay? So if you attack yourself, you can't enter the presence of God. God doesn't want that. God doesn't believe you're guilty of anything. Okay? So, paragraph 6. Christ is at God's altar, waiting to welcome his Son. Right? But come wholly without condemnation, for otherwise you will believe that the door is barred and you cannot enter. All right? You cannot enter the place where God would have you be. Okay? But love yourself with the love of Christ, for so does your Father love you. You can refuse to enter, but you cannot bar the door that Christ holds open. Come unto me, who hold it open for you. For while I live, it cannot be shut, and I live forever. God is my life and yours, and nothing is denied by God to his Son. Okay? Jesus says, come to me. I hold the door open for you. And while I live, the door can't be closed. All right? While I live, the door cannot be shut, and I live forever. God is my life and yours, and nothing is denied by God to his Son. God gives me everything. So come to me. Let me show you who you are. That's what he's saying. Don't blame yourself for anything. And if you have the strength to take the blame off other people, just don't put it on yourself. Ask me to help you. I'm here. I'm holding the door open. And you can't close the door. I'm here. I'm here forever. All right? And God denies me nothing and therefore denies you nothing, because we are the same. We are one and the same. Right? And that's what we're trying to get us all to remember. Okay? Christ is at God's altar, waiting to welcome his Son. So the Christ, the offspring of God, the emanation of God, okay, the anointed one, as the roots of the word Christ, right? You are that, right? You are that. That part of you that you dissociated from is waiting for you in the mind. He's waiting for you at God's altar, which is your mind, waiting to welcome you. All right? But come without condemnation. But you have to come without condemnation, either of the other or of yourself. Otherwise, you think the door is barred. All right? You'll believe the door is barred and you can't enter. Oh, I'm just this, that, I am whatever, as Ken would say, a scurvy worm. I'm a scurvy worm. All right. I can't get into heaven. He says, if you come in with that thought, you can't. You have to realize who you are. So ask me who you are. All right? The door's not barred. Right? And it is impossible that you cannot enter the place where God wants you to be. All right? All you have to do is love yourself. All right? You can refuse to enter, but you can't bar the door. You can't keep it closed. All right? You can refuse to enter, but I'm there holding the door open. Okay. It's because while I live, I hold the door open and I live forever. So think about that. Paragraph 7. At God's altar, Christ waits for the restoration of himself in you. God knows his Son as wholly blameless as himself, and he is approached through the appreciation of his Son. Christ waits for your acceptance of him as yourself, and of his wholeness as yours. For Christ is the Son of God, who lives in his Creator and shines with his glory. Christ is the extension of the love and the loveliness of God, as perfect as his Creator, and at peace with him. All right? So he's reiterating and bringing it up, kicking it up a notch, as Emerald would say. All right? At God's altar, Christ waits for the restoration of himself in you. So he's waiting for the memory of the Christ to be restored in your mind. That's who you are. You are the emanation of God. Waiting. Now we're waiting for that to be restored to you. All right? And God only knows you as blameless. All right? So don't go blaming yourself for anything. If you do, you ask, help me to see myself correctly. All right? And God is approached as you become to appreciate yourself and the other. You're approaching God. Christ waits for your acceptance of him as yourself. So the Christ in you is waiting for you to realize that, to realize who you are. All right? Christ is the extension of the love and the loveliness of God, as perfect as his Creator, and at peace with him. That's who you are. All right? In reality, that's who you are. You are the extension of the love and the loveliness of God. You are as perfect as your Creator, and you are at peace with Him. All right? And you'll recognize that at some moment in time. And then you'll be done with time. So, paragraph 8, blessed is the Son of God, whose radiance is of his Father, and whose glory he wills to share as his Father shares it with him. There is no condemnation in the Son, for there is no condemnation in the Father. Sharing the perfect love of the Father, the Son must share what belongs to him, for otherwise he will not know the Father or the Son. Peace be unto you who rest in God, and in whom the whole sonship rests. Okay? So there's no condemnation in the Son because there's no condemnation in God. So when we find ourselves condemning or blaming, it's the time to ask, help me to correct this. Help me to correct this. All right? Because you are the Son of God, whose radiance is of the Father. All right? And who wills to share the glory. All right? So let's end with these words, the last sentence in the paragraph. Peace be unto you who rest in God, and in whom the whole sonship rests. Okay. You become the comforter. Alrighty then. See you next time.